Welcome back to Dentro la Storia, the channel for those who love contemporary history. Giovanni and I have noticed that you really enjoy sea stories. Stories involving sailors and surface ships, and sometimes even submarines. So we thought of a rather unique story about an Italian ship that had an extremely long and, in some ways, adventurous life. It's a ship named after a saint, a mythological figure from religion, mainly associated with the dragon, you've already guessed it, St. George. This is a story of the sea, this is a story of a ship, this is a story of men, of sailors. It's also a story of courage, and it's a very unique story that I urge you to follow with us throughout what is a real voyage. The armored cruiser St. George represented one of the pinnacles of Italian naval design in the early 1900s, and at the same time one of the last great examples of a type of ship, that of armored cruisers, destined to disappear with the advent of single-caliber battleships, battle cruisers, and later, new types of cruisers, the heavy cruiser and the light cruiser. The story of San Giorgio is intertwined with that of the Royal Navy during a period of profound technological, political, and strategic transformations, and it culminates in a story we've already partly told you, that of the fortress of Tobruk, the cursed city. But let's go back to the beginning. 19th century Italy, which was a young state, the unification had only been completed a few decades earlier, was trying to establish itself as a maritime power, not only in the Mediterranean. Naval competition with Austria, Hungary, and France had pushed the Royal Navy to equip itself with modern vessels, capable of operating both in fleet missions and in tasks of protecting shipping and maintaining a colonial presence. Shipbuilding in Italy was becoming increasingly advanced and the subject of more research, leading to the creation of ships so beautiful and efficient that they were exported. Just think that based on the design of the armored cruiser Garibaldi, which had given rise to its own class, there had been exports. Italy had exported the Garibaldi, its designs and its achievements. It had exported it to Argentina, to Japan. It had even sold an armored cruiser that still exists today to Greece, the Giorgio's Avrov. You can still find it anchored at Piraeus today, flying the Greek flag as the theoretical flagship of the Hellenic Navy and as a museum ship if you visit Greece. Go take a look at the Giorgio's Avrov and you can see for yourself the Italian quality of its construction. Going back to the period between the late 1800s and early 1900s, the armored cruiser at the time represented what we would call a compromise solution. A ship that was fast enough, well armed and protected, capable of holding its own even against larger vessels, as well as carrying out independent operations. With the San Giorgio class, the Royal Navy outdid itself, managing to surpass the limitations of previous vessels, especially in terms of protection and the selection and arrangement of armament. The San Giorgio was laid down at the Royal Navy shipyards in Castellamare di Stabia in 1905, launched 3 years later, and entered service in 1910. He was the lead ship of a now completed series. Alongside him was his twin, San Marco, built with small but significant differences. From a design perspective, the San Giorgio stood out for having more rational armor compared to previous classes. It had a continuous armored belt along the entire waterline, adequate protection for the gun turrets, and an arrangement of the main armament that favored firepower over wide-firing arcs. The main armament, in fact, consisted of 4 254mm guns placed in 2 twin turrets, one at the bow and one at the stern, and a secondary battery of 190mm guns, also in twin turrets, arranged around the central part of the hull. And then light artillery for defense against smaller units, starting with torpedo boats, and later upgraded for use against aerial threats. The great risk, the one that began during the Great War and would be increasingly experienced in the following years, the ship's steam propulsion allowed for a maximum speed of over 22 knots, which was considerable for that time. A state-of-the-art ship, as they said, but when the San Giorgio entered service, it was already partly outdated. 4 years earlier, when the San Giorgio was still under construction at Castellamare di Stabia, The British had launched the Dreadnought. We already talked about it in last month's video dedicated to battleships. A revolutionary ship that quickly made all mixed caliber battleships and many armored cruisers obsolete. Despite this, the San Giorgio remained a powerful and versatile ship. So the Royal Navy was happy to put her into service with a fairly quick baptism of fire. Between 1911 and 1912, the Kingdom of Italy declared war on the Ottoman Empire for the conquest of Libya in what became known as the Italo-Turkish War. The San Giorgio took part in operations in the eastern Mediterranean and along the Libyan coast, providing artillery support for landings and helping to control the sea routes. During this period, the San Giorgio proved to be effective, confirmed the soundness of its design, and an aspect not to be underestimated, also proved to be an excellent ship for crew training. At the outbreak of the First World War, however, the San Giorgio, which had only been in service for a few years and was still relatively new, was already considered a second-line ship. Nevertheless, it was assigned to important duties. It mainly operated in the Adriatic, carrying out patrol missions, escort duties, and serving as a deterrent presence in the concept of flitting against the Austro-Hungarian Navy. Like many large units of the Royal Navy, the San Giorgio did not have the opportunity to engage in naval battles, but it was still considered a fairly useful ship. At the end of the conflict, the classic question arises, what should be done with the older ships? Many of these are sent to be dismantled in order to recover scrap metal. The San Giorgio is not. While its twin, the San Marco, is gradually stripped of everything useful and turned into a radio-controlled target for training exercises. The San Giorgio carries out training activities, travels abroad, for example to Latin America, in the summer of 24, carrying the Crown Prince Umberto di Savoia on board. Then it travels to the Red Sea, goes on another cruise, but by now it is considered obsolete as a unit for operational missions. So between 1930 and 1935, it is stationed in Pola as a training ship, nothing more. In 1936, something changes. The Spanish Civil War breaks out. We have already talked about it in a mini-series that you can find in our channel's playlists. Mussolini himself decides to intervene actively. From the Spanish War, with supposedly volunteer divisions, actually fully armed and sent to support the rebels, the nationalists led by Franco. In addition to the ground divisions and the Legionary Air Force, a contingent of surface ships and submarines is also sent to support the war effort of Franco and his men. Officially, in reality, the Italian mission was supposed to be part of the patrol of Spanish and international waters to prevent the risk of arms smuggling. In reality, we know it very well. The Italian ships commit acts of real piracy against civilian ships carrying supplies for Republican Spain. And in some cases, they even attack civilian targets by bombing cities, especially at night. In this operational context, the San Giorgio is removed from its role as a training ship, put back into service, and assigned to the Naval Division as a command ship. It's an assignment that lasts very little, less than a year. Between 1937 and 1938, the San Giorgio is taken to dry dock and radically modernized, with a dual role, that of a training ship, still for the summer cruises of the cadets from the Naval Academy of Livorno, but also with the possibility of being quickly returned to service as a combat ship. The reconstruction involves the interior spaces, obviously to create room to accommodate the cadets, but also the superstructures, the engine system, and some modifications to the propulsion. Removal of 6 boilers. The 8 remaining boilers are adapted for oil combustion. 2 of the funnels are removed, recognized as a city of importance. Importance. The city recognized as a city of importance. City of importance. Recognized as a city, external fittings are removed, the 76mm cannons, the torpedo launchers, and all minor weapons are eliminated. The main artillery is kept, but the anti-aircraft artillery is increased. With the outbreak of the Second World War, most of the training ships are assigned to minor duties. San Giorgio, which avoided being decommissioned due to its excessive technological obsolescence, already has 30 years of service behind it, and in any case, it has been surpassed by the new heavy cruisers. It is assigned with air and naval defense duties to the Naval Command of Libya at the Tobruk base. It has already been there since May 13, 1944 weeks before the outbreak of the war. Its purpose is to serve as a floating, coastal, and anti-aircraft battery. It doesn't have the speed to operate in a fleet on the open sea. It can only serve as a fortress on the water to prevent the British from attacking the port of Tobruk, possibly with amphibious forces, and to contribute to the anti-aircraft defense of the stronghold. For this very reason, the ship is surrounded in the port by anti-torpedo nets, while sandbags are placed on the deck to reinforce its limited horizontal protection. During the first days of the war, the San Giorgio responds to various British air raids on Tobruk until June 28, 1940, when it is actually the anti-aircraft artillery of the San Giorgio that hits a plane that is not British, but Italian. It's a Savoia Marchetti SM-79, the plane on which Marshal of Italy and Governor of Libya, Italo Balbo, is traveling. The downing of that plane costs Balbo his life. It's an extremely mysterious death that has been speculated about for a long time. There's a possibility that, in the end, it was a deliberate shoot-down to eliminate a troublesome personal enemy of Mussolini, causing not only the return of Rodolfo Graziani to Libya, but also a change in strategy. Graziani, increasingly pushed by Mussolini, crosses the border into Egypt and settles in Sidi al-Barani. Acting like an old Roman centurion, he creates a centuriated camp. He provides his soldiers with water brought in by uprooting the aqueduct from the Cyrenaic Gibel and forces the soldiers to build a road for transporting supplies. The San Giorgio changes its commander. In fact, Stefano Pugliese arrives, a frigate captain who was already the deputy commander of the cruiser Garibaldi at Punta Stilo. Pugliese is an energetic and pragmatic man. He knows that the task assigned to him is not simple. He also knows that the San Giorgio does not have the navigation qualities necessary to carry out sorties. He must keep the crew always well-trained, always ready for action and for battle, and knowing that that ship, in the event that the British arrive, will be doomed. And that's what happens in 1941. A month earlier, Graziani saw his entire army wiped out in just a few hours. At Sidi Barani, the British attack completely destroyed the Marshal's army. The only armored force present, the Maletti group, was caught almost in their sleep. Maletti dies with a bullet to the head, just as he sticks his face out of his tent. Some of the tanks from his group are captured by the Australians, who repaint the tanks with a different livery, featuring a large white kangaroo on the sides. And it's those very tanks that arrive in front of Tobruk in January 1941. The stronghold is isolated. It is heavily attacked from both land and air. At that moment, San Giorgio resists as best it can. The ship is subjected to as many as 10 heavy attacks with bombs and torpedoes. The ship responds to these attacks with all its onboard weapons, shooting down and damaging 47 English aircraft. On January 21, 1941, 3 shells from an aircraft put one of the 100mm anti-aircraft guns out of action. Pugliese realizes that Tobruk is now lost. He asks for permission to leave the moorings. He asks to go out to open sea even at the cost of facing the English ships and trying to return to Italy. The authorization does not come. Pugliese's request is denied. According to Supermarina, the San Giorgio command at sea would be too easy a target. It must stay there. Where? Until the ultimate sacrifice. Pugliese doesn't agree, but he accepts. Towards the end of January 21st, in the late afternoon, Pugliese sees the rising Anglo-Australian tide approaching more and more. He sees wave after wave after wave of bombers, torpedo planes, and fighter bombers coming in, targeting the port and, of course, his ship. Already at 11 in the morning, the bomb had destroyed the communication cable that reached the shore. It had effectively isolated the San Giorgio. After more bombings at 2:30 post-meridium and at 5 post-meridium, another bomb hits the hull and reduces the ship's defensive capability. Only at 7 post-meridium, when it is already dark, does a signal finally arrive from the fortress. Tobruk is about to fall. Then Pugliese boards a launch. It is 8:30 post-meridium. He goes ashore to meet Rear Admiral Massimiliano Viatina, the naval officer in charge of the fortress. Only one thing to do: set the demolition charges and abandon the ship. The San Giorgio cannot withstand the sea. Its hull has been compromised. Even if they opened the anti-torpedo nets at that moment, its escape would last very little. The only thing to do is to prevent the English from capturing the ship, even if it's damaged. Pugliese returns on board. He begins to disembark the wounded and unnecessary personnel and prepares everything needed for scuttling the ship. He decides to stay on board until the final explosion. The explosion happens, but not without difficulty, since there wasn't enough explosives on board, especially naval mines, to finish the job properly. Basically, a fuse has to be connected to bombs placed in the ammunition storage for the main guns for the 254mm caliber at midnight on January 22nd. After all the crew members have disembarked, Pugliese gives the order to light the fuses. He is the last one to leave. It's about 1 in the morning. Initially, the explosion doesn't happen, so Pugliese goes back on board with a few crew members and finds that unfortunately, the fuses have gone out. So he gives the order to pour gasoline in the ammunition rooms. The fire should actually trigger the explosion. But during these operations, the central room, already flooded with gasoline, blows up and other explosions are heard. Pugliese is wounded and is taken to the hospital, and that's where the British capture him the next day. Some men died in the explosion. First-class torpedo chief Alessandro Montagna and sub-lieutenant Giuseppe Buccioni. Witnesses say that Pugliese, before being taken to the hospital, cast a curse on Tobruk. It will be the first. There will be others. The San Giorgio and Commander Pugliese are awarded the Gold Medal of Military Valor. Pugliese ends his war in India at the Yol concentration camp. It only comes at the end of the war, but the story of the San Giorgio doesn't end here. It continues, because it's such an absurd and incredible story that it still deserves to be told. Not only because Pugliese initially receives the medal in memoriam since they believe he's dead, he's even promoted posthumously. Captain of the ship, he'll find out when he returns to his homeland and forces the registry offices to update his status. But besides this, the San Giorgio remains there in Tobruk, gutted in the harbor. The English, during the period they occupied the stronghold, didn't even bother to recover anything, except for a few belongings. And it stays there, like a blackened silhouette. Right in the shadow of that silhouette, you can see the fishing boats trying to recover something from the sea. And in the shadow of that silhouette, after the Italo-German forces retook Tobruk in the summer of 1942, the San Marco infantrymen stationed there as an anti-landing force would go. And still in the shadow of that silhouette, at the beginning of autumn 42, the British commandos would face off with daggers between their teeth and hand grenades right against the San Marco in a truly senseless massacre. The San Giorgio remains there. 3 100mm cannons, the last one still working, are brought ashore as they can still be reused in some way. They are brought back to Italy, restored to working condition, used as coastal batteries. Even when the stronghold falls again, this time for good, in the winter of 42, 43, the San Giorgio remains there, crippled, destroyed, blackened by smoke. Only in 1951, long after the war has ended, the Italian Republic and the Kingdom of Libya agree to recover that wreck, which is cumbersome. They want to free Tobruk from an unwanted guest. The San Giorgio is still able to float, and the recovery is officially attempted in 1952. The ship had settled on the seabed, but soon it was brought back to the surface with compensation tanks and towed by a tugboat, the Ursus. The idea is to bring it back to Italy, dismantle it, recover the iron material, and close its story forever. But maybe Pugliese didn't just cast a curse on Tobruk. Maybe he cast it on the San Giorgio as well, because when it reached the open sea, the old cruiser, perhaps tired, wanted to return to the sea. It starts to become a burden, a dead weight. It's too heavy. It's taking on water. The Ursus, even at full power, can't tow it. The tow cables start to loosen. In the end, they break. The wreck sinks 100 miles from Tobruk. That's how the story of the San Giorgio ends, the last armored cruiser of Italy, first of the Royal Navy, and then as a wreck of the Italian Navy. The last of its kind, a ship that had gone through the Italo-Turkish War, the First World War, the tensions of the 1920s, the Spanish Civil War, and the Second World War. San Giorgio had seen so much and had lived a lot. Maybe it just wanted to rest forever, even though they had tried in various ways to recover it, to give it one last purpose, one last meaning. It didn't want to be reduced to scrap or to rust. It just wanted to find a worthy place, the last of its kind, a ship that had gone through the war, in the Mediterranean, no longer above it, but below, where there is peace in the depths, where the rumble of bombs, torpedoes, and conflict cannot be heard, where even the memories of those who lived on board, who fought, were wounded, and died, now rest. A return to the sea, the fitting conclusion to a story so incredible that perhaps one day it would even deserve a movie.